before he got crucified? He says, I no longer call you slaves, for slaves do not know their master's business. I call you friends. So this kind of friend relationship, this kind of, if you will, intimacy, God is calling us to. He is attempting to raise us up from our animal nature into a love relationship bordering on equality like this. He is still God. We are still them. We are still his creatures. But he is calling us to a level of intimacy in which we share in the divine nature of God. The goal of our salvation is that we become by grace what Jesus is by nature, and that is God. Now that is a deep thought to meditate on. God calls us to equality with him. He attempts to raise us up out of our lowliness to a position of equanimity by grace that he has by nature. And if you don't believe me, then you need to talk to Father tomorrow at one of the, not tomorrow, next week, when he goes over one of the prayers. When he pours the water into the wine, you can read this in your missalettes. He says the prayer, and I might be messing it up, but this is what it says. May by the mixture of this water and wine, may we come to share in the divinity of Christ as he humbled himself to share in our humanity. I don't know if you ever heard that, but I've heard it in like daily mass. Listen for it again if he says it out loud. When he pours the water into the wine, you know the drops? He says, may by the mixture of this water and wine, may we come to share in the divinity of Christ. Do you hear what he's saying?
Yes.
We participate in the divinity of Christ as he humbled himself to share in our humanity. So what Jesus did in condescending to us, Jesus is attempting to elevate us to him. That's the goal. It's not just to get our sorry self into heaven. That's nice, but it's more than that. He's offering us a share in his divinity. You say, well, I just don't believe that. I think you're stretching it. I think you're making it all up. You know, blah, 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 blah. Okay. Fine, don't believe me. Fine, don't believe me. No, I don't want to talk to you anymore. 2 Peter 1, verse 3. Don't believe me, believe St. Peter. We'll end on this. His divine power has granted us all things that pertain to life and godliness, through the knowledge of him who called us to his own glory and excellence, by which he has granted us his precious and very great promises, that through these you may escape from the corruption that is in this world because of passion, and become partakers of the divine nature. Did you hear that? God is calling us to become partakers of the divine nature. We become by grace, in sharing his divinity, what Christ has by nature. He is divine. He didn't get it. He was it. He's calling us to share in that. In the same way that he humbled himself to share in our humanity. That is an awesome call. That is an awesome gift. And just real quick, just bear with me. This is what makes the Protestant evangelical gospel weak. What do you mean weak? You know, they come around knocking, have you been saved? Have you been born again? You know, all that stuff. They're trying to save your soul from hell. Noble cause, don't want to take anything from it. But what's weak about it is that's all that there is to it. It's just save your soul from hell and become a good person until you die and go to heaven. That's basically, very ultra simplistically, but that's all there is. Catholic salvation is far more deep than that. It's this understanding that what we lost in the fall was this union with God, this intimacy with God. And redemption is not merely restoring it, but elevating us to a position greater than what Adam and Eve had. By becoming partakers of the divine nature, we become as Christ is by nature through grace. It is by grace that we are saved through our faith. This is not from ourselves. It is a gift of God. It's not as a result of works. No one can boast about it. But we are saved to become partakers and sharers of this divine life. The very life that Jesus has by nature, he gives to us by grace. What a glorious salvation that is. Praise be to God.
Amen.
And falling in love with this God of glory who gives us, just gives and gives and gives.
Yes.
And loves beyond all that we can imagine. This is what we're learning in the song. And we'll continue next week. Not next week, week after next. Next week, we'll go through the Mass.